On the night of December 24, 1847, in Yazoo County, Mississippi, something happened that would shake the entire American South. A 38-year-old enslaved cook named Maria quietly boiled her master and his 3 grown sons alive in huge cauldrons of pork fat. 4 white men screamed as their skin melted like candle wax. The stench of burning flesh mixed with the aroma of gingerbread baking in the oven. It was the last Christmas dinner the Thornwood family would ever have. By Christmas morning, Thornwood Plantation had become a crime scene that would haunt Mississippi for decades. But this story didn't start on Christmas Eve. It began 3 months earlier, in September 1847, when Maria watched her world turn to fire and oil. This is her story, and it is entirely real. The Mississippi Delta in 1847 was the heart of King Cotton. Endless white fields stretched as far as the eye could see, picked by hands that would never benefit from their labor. Yazoo County was especially cruel, even by Deep South standards. Here, plantation owners competed to see who could harvest the most cotton, break the most spirits, and accumulate the most wealth on the backs of human beings treated like tools. Thornwood Plantation was one of the crown jewels of this empire of suffering. It spanned 500 acres of fertile delta soil with 200 enslaved people working from sunrise to sunset, producing an annual cotton yield that made Master Edmund Thornwood one of Mississippi's richest men. The big house rose 3 stories high, white columns gleaming under the southern sun. Magnolias lined the driveway, and a wide veranda wrapped around the entire structure. Inside were crystal chandeliers from France, furniture from England, carpets from Persia, all bought with money taken from cotton picked by bleeding fingers. Master Edmund Thornwood was 62 years old in 1847, tall, lean, with iron-gray hair and cold blue eyes that never softened. Throughout the county, enslaved people whispered his nickname with fear, the Iron Master. Not because he was strong, though he was, but because of his favorite tool of punishment, a branding iron stamped with his initials, E.T. By 1847, Edmund Thornwood had personally branded 89 enslaved people, men, women, and even children as young as 10. The iron hung in his study like a trophy. He would heat it in the fireplace until it glowed red, then press it against bare flesh, usually the shoulder. Sometimes, if the crime was severe, he branded faces. The smell of burning skin was as common on Thornwood Plantation as the smell of cotton. Edmund had 3 sons, each one crueler than the last. Nathaniel, 35, the eldest, was tall and broad-shouldered with his father's icy eyes. He served as the head overseer, controlling the field hands. Nathaniel had a quota system. Each enslaved person had to pick 200 pounds of cotton per day. Anyone who failed got 20 lashes at the whipping post, no exceptions. Pregnant women, elderly, sick, children, it didn't matter. On a busy week, Nathaniel personally whipped 30 people. Jeremiah, the middle son at 32, was leaner but more vicious, dark-haired with a thin, precise mustache. He oversaw the cotton processing, ginning, pressing, loading. He was known for accidents. Hands got caught in machinery, and he timed how long it took for the victim to pass out before stopping the machine. He even kept a journal he called Scientific Observations on Negro Pain Tolerance. 7 people had died in Jeremiah's machines over 5 years. Caleb, the youngest at 28, was blond like his mother and handsome in a way that made him more dangerous. He managed the house slaves and took special interest in the younger women. His cabin behind the big house was where girls between 14 and 20 were summoned. Sometimes they returned, sometimes they didn't. When asked about a missing 16-year-old, Caleb shrugged, probably ran away. They do that. Her body was found 3 months later in a shallow grave near the cotton gin. The Thornwood men competed constantly. Who could be crueler, extract more work, break more spirits. Sunday dinners were filled with stories of punishments, told like hunting tales, accompanied by laughter and bourbon. This was Maria's world. Maria was born in Yoruba territory, now part of Nigeria. Her original name was Ayamide, meaning "my joy has arrived." She remembered little of her first 12 years, fragments. Her mother's voice, the taste of palm wine, red earth between her toes, drums at night. Then came the slavers. The Middle Passage lasted 11 weeks. Renamed Maria by Portuguese traders, she arrived in Charleston, South Carolina in 1821 at age 12, speaking no English. She understood only that her world had been destroyed. She was sold to a rice plantation in the South Carolina Low Country. There, an elderly enslaved woman named Abigail took pity on the frightened child. Abigail was African too, though from another region. She remembered. She taught Maria English survival, which herbs could heal, which could kill. "Never forget what they took from us," Abigail whispered. "Never forget you are Yoruba. You are not their property. One day the ancestors will demand justice for these crimes." Maria was taught to cook, a skill that kept her in the big house rather than the fields. By 16, she could make elaborate meals, French sauces, English roasts, Southern classics. Her hands knew the rhythm of kitchens, the knife against the board, the sizzle in hot oil, the timing of ovens. At 18, she was sold to a Georgia plantation, at 22 to Alabama, and at 26 to Thornwood Plantation, bought specifically as a skilled cook. For 12 years Maria prepared every meal for the Thornwood family. She woke at 4:30 a.m., started kitchen fires, had breakfast ready by 7. Biscuits, ham, eggs, grits, gravy. After breakfast, lunch preparations began. After lunch, dinner preparations. The family ate like royalty. Roasted meats, vegetables, fresh bread, pies, cakes, all made by Maria's hands. The kitchen was her domain, a separate building behind the big house, connected by a covered walkway. Inside were huge brick ovens, multiple fireplaces, shelves of spices, and 4 massive cast iron cauldrons holding 30 gallons each. They were used for everything: boiling water, rendering lard, making soap, and especially deep frying. The Thornwoods loved fried chicken, fried pork, fried everything. Several times a week, Maria heated a cauldron to 375 and fried meat until golden. She knew exactly how hot the oil needed to be, how long it took to heat, and what happened when living flesh touched that temperature. Master Edmund trusted Maria completely. She had keys to all doors, access to every supply, freedom to move at any hour. In 12 years she never gave him cause to doubt her. She was quiet, obedient, perfect. She said, "Yes, master," and "No, master," eyes always lowered. She trained younger girls, ran the kitchen like clockwork, but she had a life beyond cooking. In 1835, at age 26, she married Isaiah. Not legally, as enslaved people couldn't marry, but in a ceremony witnessed by an elder preacher named Moses and their community. Isaiah was the plantation blacksmith, 30, strong, with scarred hands, intelligent, secretly literate, taught by a former owner's daughter. Together they carved a life in the margins of slavery. They had a one-room cabin with a dirt floor. At night, after endless labor, they held each other and whispered dreams of freedom. Isaiah spoke of the north, of Canada, of the Underground Railroad. "One day we'll run. We'll be free," he said. Maria wanted to believe him. Their first daughter, Grace, was born in 1835. Maria labored in the cabin while Isaiah held her hand and prayed to gods whose names he'd forgotten. Grace came into a world where she was the property of Master Thornwood from the moment of birth. 4 years later, Hope was born. Another perfect child, another piece of Maria's heart walking outside her body, exposed to all cruelty. Maria taught both girls everything she knew. Grace showed talent in the kitchen, helping at 8. Hope was quieter, thoughtful, listening to elders' stories of Africa. Both were beautiful, a danger Maria feared, knowing the fate of beautiful enslaved girls. For 12 years life continued. Isaiah at the forge, Maria in the kitchen, Grace and Hope growing. They celebrated what they could: Christmas off, Sundays singing spirituals, secret stolen moments of joy. Maria allowed herself hope. Maybe they would survive. Maybe the girls would grow up. Maybe Master Edmund would honor his drunken promise of freedom to Isaiah after 30 years. Maybe. By September 1847, Grace was 12, Hope 8, Isaiah was 42. Maria was 38. They had no way of knowing that they had exactly 3 months left together as a family. The morning of September 18, 1847 began like every other day before it. Maria woke at 4:30 as she always did. Isaiah was already awake. He rose even earlier, needing to heat the forge fires before the workday started. They dressed quietly in the dark, kissed softly so they would not wake the girls, and stepped out of their cabin into the early Mississippi air before sunrise. The slave quarters at Thornwood held 40 cabins placed in 2 long rows. Each cabin held 4 to 6 people. Nearly 200 lives were crowded into buildings that would barely be used for animals in the north. There were no windows, only dirt floors and wide cracks in the walls that let in winter cold and summer insects. Still, it was home, the only home they had ever known. Isaiah walked toward the blacksmith shop. Maria headed for the kitchen at the big house. They did not know it was the final time they would ever touch each other. Maria spent the morning the way she always did. She cooked breakfast, served the family, cleaned the dishes, and began preparing lunch. The men of Thornwood were in high spirits. News had come that cotton prices were strong. The harvest was doing well. Profits would be good this year. Master Edmund was especially pleased. He even smiled at Maria when she placed his plate in front of him. "Good work, Maria. This is the best breakfast I've had in weeks." "Thank you, Master," Maria said softly, eyes lowered, face calm. She had no idea what was about to happen. At 10 a.m., Master Edmund's voice echoed across the land. "Bell, ring the bell." The overseer rang the large bell that called all enslaved people together. It was only rung for 3 reasons: Sunday worship, Christmas, or public punishment. It was Thursday, not Sunday, not Christmas. Maria felt her stomach drop. All work stopped at once. Field hands dropped their tools. House slaves stepped out from the big house. The blacksmith shop went silent. Everyone moved toward the wide open space in front of the big house. The same space where cotton bales were loaded, where the whipping post stood, where lessons were taught through pain. 200 enslaved people stood under the burning Mississippi sun waiting. Maria saw Isaiah come out of the blacksmith shop, confusion written across his face. Their eyes met across the crowd. Grace and hope came from the cabin where they had been watching younger children. The family found each other without speaking, standing close, waiting to see what new terror Master Edmund had planned. Master Edmund stood on the veranda of the big house. His 3 sons stood beside him like followers. Nathaniel held a whip. Jeremiah carried a rifle. Caleb held a torch, strange since it was full daylight. "Bring him out," Master Edmund ordered. 2 overseers dragged Samuel forward. He was the driver, the enslaved man who oversaw other enslaved workers. Samuel shook badly, eyes wide with fear. "This morning," Master Edmund said loudly, his voice spreading through the silent crowd, "tools went missing from the blacksmith shop. Valuable tools. Tools that cost me money." Maria felt Isaiah stiffen next to her. "Samuel came to me with information. It seems our blacksmith has been stealing, planning to sell them, planning to buy his freedom." "That's a lie!" Isaiah shouted before he could stop himself. Every eye turned to him, speaking out of turn, challenging the master. "A death sentence," Master Edmund smiled. It was a cold and cruel smile. "Bring the blacksmith." Overseers grabbed Isaiah. He fought back, actually fought them, landing a punch that broke one man's nose. But there were 6 of them. They beat him with fists and clubs, dragged him forward, and forced him to his knees. Maria pulled her daughters close. Don't look," but she could not look away. Master Edmund stepped down slowly, enjoying every second. He walked to Isaiah, bent down, grabbed his chin, and forced his face up. "You've been a good blacksmith, Isaiah. 14 years of solid work. But stealing that I cannot allow. If I let one Negro steal, soon all of you will think you can take what belongs to me. I didn't steal anything," Isaiah said quietly, still proud even now. "Samuel lies to gain favor. There are no missing tools. Check your records." "I don't need to check anything," Master Edmund replied. "Samuel told me." "That is enough." He stood and faced the crowd. "Today I will make an example you will never forget. An example to make sure none of you ever think of stealing from me again." He nodded to his sons. Nathaniel and Jeremiah walked into the kitchen building. They came out carrying a massive empty cauldron between them. It was so large it took 2 strong men to lift it. They placed it in the center of the yard over a fire pit normally used to melt animal fat. Then they returned and brought out a second cauldron. Then a third. Maria's mind could not understand what she was seeing. These were her cauldrons, the ones she cooked with every day. "Fill them," Master Edmund ordered. It took half an hour. Enslaved men were forced to carry heavy buckets of pork oil from storage. Barrel after barrel of expensive lard was poured into the cauldrons until each was half full, about 15 gallons each. Then Master Edmund's sons lit fires beneath them. The crowd watched in fear and confusion. Why 3 cauldrons? Maria knew. She knew exactly what oil did when heated past 400 degrees. She knew the sound it made when it reached heat, that low, deadly bubbling. She knew what happened when flesh touched it. She knew. Please, she whispered. Please, no. Please, God, no. Isaiah looked at her from across the yard 20 feet away. Too far to reach, too far to save. I love you, he mouthed. Grace and Hope clung to their mother, not fully understanding, only knowing something terrible was coming. The fires burned hotter. The sun beat down. 200 enslaved people stood frozen. The oil slowly heated warm, hot, then dangerously hot. After 40 minutes the oil reached temperature, 375 degrees Fahrenheit. The surface bubbled softly, ready to fry. Strip him, Master Edmund said. The overseers tore Isaiah's clothes away until he stood naked before everyone, exposed, shamed, yet still standing tall, still meeting Master Edmund's eyes. Do you have anything to say? Master Edmund asked. I am innocent, Isaiah replied. And you will go to hell for what you have done to my people. Master Edmund showed no emotion. Put him in. 4 overseers grabbed Isaiah. He fought with all his strength, the strength of a blacksmith who had worked fire and iron for 14 years. He threw one man down and broke another's arm, but they were too many. They tied his hands behind his back, tied his feet together. Then they carried him to the first cauldron. No. Maria screamed and tried to run forward. 2 enslaved women held her back, not from cruelty but mercy, because running forward would have meant death for her too. Daddy! Grace and Hope cried out together. Isaiah looked at his family one last time. Remember, you are loved, he said calmly. Remember who you are. They lowered him into the oil. What followed would scar every moment of this story. When human skin touches oil heated to 375 degrees, it does not burn slowly. It cooks at once. Isaiah's scream was not human. It was a sound beyond description. His body jerked violently as the oil boiled around him. Moisture in his skin turned to steam. The smell was like frying pork, because that is what it was, flesh cooking. His skin blistered instantly, huge bubbles rising and bursting. The outer layer peeled away in strips. Within 30 seconds his body turned red, then pale, then black. He fought with impossible strength. The rope on his hands snapped. His hands broke the surface, reaching for air, for life, for anything. Overseers pushed him back under with long poles. His screams lasted 4 minutes, 4 minutes of pain beyond words. His eyes boiled, his tongue swelled and burst, his hair burned away. The fat under his skin melted and sizzled. Maria collapsed. Her legs gave out and she fell to the dirt. Grace and Hope fell with her. All 3 screamed, begged, prayed to any god that might listen. But no god stopped it. After 4 minutes the screams became wet and broken. After 6 minutes there was only silence. After 8 minutes his body stopped moving. Master Edmund checked his pocket watch. 8 minutes. Interesting. I expected less, Jeremiah wrote in his journal. The oil kept bubbling around what remained of Isaiah. 200 enslaved people stood silent. Some cried. Most could not move. This was beyond fear. This was hell made real. Master Edmund faced the crowd. That is what happens to thieves. Carry this lesson with you to your graves. He turned to leave. Father, wait, Jeremiah said. Master Edmund turned back. Jeremiah pointed to Maria and the girls, collapsed in the dirt. The blacksmith's family, they share his blood. Should they not be punished too? Master Edmund paused. The woman is my cook. I need her. The daughters then, Caleb said eagerly. They are old enough to understand. Destroy the whole family and no one will ever steal again. Master Edmund thought for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You make a fair point. A complete example. He looked at the overseers. Bring the daughters. Time stopped. Maria's mind broke apart. She fell at Master Edmund's feet. Please. Please. They did nothing wrong. They are only children. Please take me. Punish me. Not them. Master Edmund walked past her as if she did not exist. Grace was 12. Hope was 8. They did not understand what was happening. They only felt fear. Mama, Hope cried as the overseers pulled her away. Mama, help us, Grace screamed. Maria tried to run toward them, but 4 enslaved women grabbed her and held her back. They held her to keep her alive, because running forward meant death. And if she died too, then everything would be lost. Grace, Hope, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Maria screamed until her voice gave out. The girls fought as hard as they could. Grace bit one man's hand. Hope kicked and scratched, crying and shaking. But they were children, they were small. The overseers tied them together so they could not move apart. The two girls held onto each other. It was the only comfort they had left. "It's okay, Hope," Grace whispered. "It's okay, Mama is here. Daddy is waiting. We will be together." They were carried away. "No. No. Please, take me instead." Maria's voice broke. The Thornwood sons watched. One counted time. One wrote notes. One smiled. Grace and Hope were taken together. What happened to them should never have happened, but it must be remembered because this is what slavery did. Their cries were high and frightened. Grace's last word was "Mama." Hope only cried out. The sounds stopped. Maria watched and could not turn away. Even when she closed her eyes, she still heard everything. The smell, the silence afterward, the knowing of it all stayed inside her forever. When it was over, Maria made no sound at all. She stared at the place where her whole life had ended. Something inside her died. The part that could feel kindness, hope, or love disappeared. What remained was something hard and old, something shaped by pain, by chains, by years of cruelty. What remained was purpose. Master Edmund stopped near her. "Remove them later. Bury them where you bury your people. Be back in the kitchen tomorrow morning, breakfast at 7. Then he walked away. His sons followed. Everyone was sent back to work. Maria was left alone on the ground, staring at what was left of her family. She did not remember being taken back to her cabin. She did not remember the days that followed. Women from the quarters brought her water and whispered prayers. On the 4th day, Maria stood up. She walked to the burial ground beyond the fields. There were 3 fresh graves, her husband, her daughters. They had been laid to rest with care and quiet tears. Maria stood as the sun set, turning the sky dark red. She did not cry. She spoke in a language she had not used in years. She asked her ancestors for strength. She asked for guidance. She asked for justice. She cut her palm and let the blood fall onto the earth. By this blood she swore they would answer for what they had done. She pressed her hand to each grave. "Rest now. Watch me. I will not forget." Maria returned to her cabin. She washed her face. The next morning she went back to the kitchen. Master Edmund welcomed her as if nothing had happened. He spoke of order, of discipline. Maria answered softly, "Yes, master." She worked. She listened. She watched. Over the next months she became quiet and perfect in her duties. Her food pleased them. Her silence comforted them. They trusted her. Inside she was learning everything. Schedules, habits, weak points. She remembered Christmas Eve. The kitchen, the hours alone, the doors, the silence. And she planned carefully, slowly, patiently, perfecting the mixture, testing different proportions, calculating doses according to body weight. She estimated Master Edmund at about 180 pounds, Nathaniel 220, Jeremiah 190, Caleb 175. They needed to remain conscious. They needed to understand exactly what was happening. She wanted them to feel every second of what she intended to do. Next, she considered a delivery method. The men would be drinking bourbon, as they always did, pouring it themselves from the decanter they brought from the big house. She couldn't poison the bourbon directly without risking someone else drinking it by mistake. Then she remembered, they always ate while drinking. Smoked meats, cheese, bread. Master Edmund had a particular fondness for her gingerbread. He would eat several pieces every Christmas Eve. Gingerbread was perfect. The strong molasses and rich spices would mask any bitter flavor of the poison. Maria began practicing. Early December found her baking gingerbread repeatedly, perfecting the recipe, making sure it was exactly the treat Master Edmund adored. He praised it every time. "Maria, this gingerbread is exceptional. Make sure there's plenty for Christmas Eve." "Yes, master. I'll bake extra just for you." She smiled as she spoke, a small, cold smile that Master Edmund misread as pride in her work. Finally, she needed to prepare the cauldrons. She couldn't raise suspicion by asking for extra lard before Christmas. That would have drawn questions. But she could accumulate it slowly. Every time she rendered fat from pork, she saved an extra cup. Every time she made soap, she set aside a pound of lard. By mid-December, she had concealed 20 gallons of pork fat in barrels tucked away at the back of the kitchen storage room, hidden under burlap and forgotten. No one noticed. No one cared. The kitchen was Maria's domain. Master Edmund never ventured into the storage areas. Everything was ready. On December 23rd, Maria visited her family's graves one final time before Christmas. The Mississippi winter was mild, 60 degrees in the day, but the nights were sharp. She stood in the enslaved people's graveyard as the sun sank low, casting long shadows over unmarked graves. She had brought offerings, cornbread, water, tobacco, which she placed carefully on each grave. Isaiah, Grace, Hope. Then she knelt in the dirt and spoke in Yoruba. Tomorrow night it happens. I've waited 3 months, planned every detail. Tomorrow they die as you died, I promise. They will suffer. They will understand the terror. They will know what they did to you. She cut her palm again, reopening the scar from 3 months past, letting the blood drip onto the graves. Watch me tomorrow. Guide my hands. Give me strength if I falter. And when it is done, when their screams have ended and justice is fulfilled, know it is for you. Everything is for you. The wind picked up. In the distance, she could hear spirituals rising from the slave quarters, preparations for Christmas celebrations. Maria didn't sing. She simply knelt, hand pressed to the earth, connecting with her lost family. I love you, I always have. Tomorrow I will prove it. She rose, brushed dirt from her dress, and returned to her cabin. Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1847, dawned cold and clear over Thornwood Plantation. Maria awoke at 4:30 a.m. As always, she dressed in the darkness of her cabin, the same cabin she had shared with Isaiah, Grace, and Hope, the same cabin once filled with laughter, now a tomb she slept in. She walked through the slave quarters toward the big house. Other enslaved people were beginning to stir. Christmas was the one day off work. Tomorrow, December 25th, they would rest, sing, and enjoy what little happiness they could find in this hell. Maria would not celebrate. Entering the kitchen building, she paused at the doorway. 4 giant cauldrons sat in their usual places, empty and cold. Soon they would be filled, soon hot. She began breakfast preparations. The Thornwood family expected a feast today: ham, eggs, biscuits, gravy, grits, fresh bread, preserves, coffee. Maria moved mechanically, hands performing familiar motions while her mind ran through tonight's plan for the 100th time. At 7:00 a.m., she served breakfast in the big house dining room. Master Edmund sat at the head, his 3 sons flanking him. Mistress Abigail Thornwood sat opposite, face pinched and cold as ever. 4 grandchildren, Nathaniel and Jeremiah's sons, ages 6 to 12, chatted excitedly about Christmas presents. Wonderful breakfast, Maria, Master Edmund said, cutting into his ham. Tonight's Christmas Eve dinner will be spectacular, I'm sure. Yes, Master, she replied. I've been preparing for weeks. Good. Remember, we'll be in the kitchen from 9 until midnight, same tradition as always. The women will retire early with the children. I remember, Master Nathaniel said, mouth full of biscuit. You're making that gingerbread Father loves, aren't you? Of course, Master Nathaniel, extra batches, just as Master Edmund requested. Excellent, Master Edmund smiled. I won't enjoy this for long, Maria thought, but her face remained neutral, subservient, empty. She cleared the plates and returned to the kitchen. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation. Maria cooked constantly, preparing the Christmas Day feast for tomorrow, baking pies and cakes, roasting meats. Other house slaves helped with cleaning and setup, but the kitchen itself was Maria's alone. At 20:00 p.m., while the family rested, Maria began final preparations. She retrieved the hidden barrels of lard from the storage room, 20 gallons, enough to fill 4 cauldrons halfway. 5 gallons went into each cauldron, poured quietly and methodically. She covered them with large lids so to anyone they appeared empty, ready for Christmas cooking. Next, the poison. Maria had hidden the mixture beneath the kitchen storage room floorboards, wrapped in oilcloth. She retrieved it now, a small leather pouch with 2 ounces of finely ground powder, a mixture of oleander digitalis and hemlock in exact proportions, enough to paralyze the 4 men without killing them. She had tested it for 3 months, calculating the precise dosage per pound of body weight. Master Edmund, 180 pounds. Nathaniel Tudor, 20 pounds, 258 ounces. Jeremiah, under 90 pounds, 21 ounces. Caleb, 175 pounds, 170, 16 ounces. She had measured each into separate small pouches, each man's personal dose. At 4:00 p.m., she began baking the gingerbread. The recipe was intricate: molasses, ginger, cinnamon, cloves, brown sugar, butter, flour, eggs. The warm, festive, innocent smell of Christmas filled the kitchen. Maria felt nothing, no joy, no anticipation, only cold focus. She baked 4 batches in 4 separate pans, each identical except for one addition. The first for Master Edmund contained his poison dose mixed thoroughly into the batter. The second for Nathaniel, his dose. The third for Jeremiah, his dose. The fourth for Caleb, his dose. The strong molasses and spice masked any bitter taste. She had tested this too. The gingerbread tasted exactly as it always had. By 60:30 p.m., the batches cooled on racks. Maria marked each pan with tiny scratches in the corners, 1 for Edmund, 2 for Nathaniel, 3 for Jeremiah, 4 for Caleb. Only she knew which was which. At 70:00 p.m. she served Christmas Eve dinner in the big house. The table groaned under roasted goose, ham, sweet potatoes, colored greens, cornbread, fresh rolls, and 3 kinds of pie. The family ate enthusiastically, praising her cooking, laughing, discussing tomorrow's celebration. Maria served mechanically, poured wine, cleared plates, smiled when expected. Master Edmund raised his glass. To family, prosperity, and another successful year at Thornwood Plantation. "Here, here," echoed the sons. Maria thought of another family, boiled alive 3 months ago, whose ghost watched and waited. Not long now. At 80:30 p.m. Mistress Abigail rose. "Comb, children, time for bed. Christmas morning comes early." The grandchildren protested, but were herded upstairs. Within 30 minutes the big house was quiet. Only the 4 Thornwood men remained downstairs, moving into the study for cigars and brandy before heading to the kitchen. Maria returned alone. Everything was in place. She removed the coited, cold and still. She built fires beneath each, using seasoned hardwood for steady heat. At 80:45 p.m., footsteps approached on the covered walkway. The 4 men entered, bringing cigar smoke and brandy. "Ah, Maria," Master Edmund said jovially. "Here we are. Same as every year. We'll stay out of your way, pretend we aren't here." "Yes, master," Maria said softly. The men settled near the ovens out of her work area. Master Edmund carried a crystal decanter of bourbon and 4 glasses. They poured drinks, lit cigars, and settled into their Christmas Eve tradition. Maria moved around them, preparing components for tomorrow's breakfast, but her attention was on the fires beneath the cauldrons. She fed them steadily, watching the flames rise and the lard warm. At 90:30 p.m. Master Edmund called Maria. "Do you have any of that gingerbread ready? I've been thinking about it all day." "Yes, master. It has cooled just enough to serve." Maria carried out the 4 pans. She cut large portions from each one, careful to serve every man from his assigned pan. "Here you are, Master Edmund," she said, placing a plate before him with 2 thick pieces from the first pan. "Master Nathaniel, 2 pieces from the second pan. Master Jeremiah, 2 pieces from the third pan. Master Caleb, 2 pieces from the fourth pan." "Excellent." Master Edmund took a heavy bite while it was still warm. "As good as ever." The others ate eagerly. Nathaniel finished his first piece in only a few bites. Jeremiah ate slowly, as if thinking about each mouthful. Caleb laughed and asked for more. "Of course, Master Caleb," Maria said calmly, giving him 2 more pieces from his pan. More poison, twice the amount. She wanted, no doubt. The men ate, drank, and smoked. They spoke of cotton prices, of the next season's planting, of news from Washington. They joked about something Nathaniel had done to a field the week before. Maria worked quietly and waited. The fires beneath the pots burned stronger. The heat rose steadily. The oil warmed minute by minute. Maria watched the time. At 1:15 p.m. His chair. "I feel strangely warm." "Is it hot in here?" "The oven, master?" Maria said evenly. "I can open a window." No. But he was not. By 130 p.m., Nathaniel stood and nearly fell. "Perhaps I drank too much." Caleb laughed, but his speech sounded thick. At 145 p.m., Jeremiah dropped his cigar and stared at his hand when it would not obey him. Something was wrong. Master Edmund tried to stand. His legs failed him. He fell back hard into the chair. "I can't." Panic entered his voice. "Do you feel this too?" None of his sons could answer properly. Nathaniel swayed. Jeremiah's mouth moved without words. Caleb slid from his chair to the floor. "Maria," Master Edmund said slowly. "Get help." Maria turned from the stove. Her face was no longer blank, no longer obedient. For the first time in months, her expression showed clear feeling, cold, focused, certain. "There will be no help," she said quietly. Master Edmund's eyes widened. "You." His body stopped responding. His mouth moved, but nothing came out. His eyes darted wildly. Nathaniel collapsed, fully aware but unable to move. Jeremiah remained seated, frozen mid-reach. Caleb lay on the floor, breathing fast, eyes wide with fear. Maria walked to Master Edmund and bent so they were eye to eye. "Do you remember September 18th?" she asked softly. "3 months ago. Do you remember what you did?" His eyes pleaded. "You killed my husband. You killed my daughters. You forced me to watch." She stood. "Tonight, you will understand." Maria checked the pots. The oil was ready. She returned to them. "You cannot move. You cannot speak. But you can feel. You can hear. You can remember." Tears streamed down Master Edmund's face. She checked the small watch she had taken weeks earlier. "There is time." Maria walked first to Caleb. "We'll begin with you." His breathing grew fast and uneven. She pulled him across the floor with effort, strength built from years of work. He could not resist. When she reached the pot, the heat alone made him shake. "This is for grace and hope," she said. "For every life you destroyed." She tied him carefully, not because he could fight, but because it mattered that it was done the same way. She raised him using the pulley, slow and steady. He saw what waited below. He understood. Maria lowered him. His body reacted even though his will could not. She did not rush. She did not stop. She counted in her head, the same way she had once been forced to count. When she was finished, she turned away. The other 3 had seen everything. They could not look away. Jeremiah had been sick. Nathaniel had lost control of himself. Master Edmund wept openly. "Now you know," Maria said quietly. "Now you feel what they felt." She went to Jeremiah next. "You wrote everything down," she said. "You called it study." She brought him to the second pot and repeated every step with care. No mercy, no haste. She counted again. When she turned back, only Nathaniel and Master Edmund remained. They knew. They waited. Maria walked toward them. "You hurt a pregnant woman and laughed when she lost her child. You punished children for working too slowly. You tore families apart just to make money." She pulled his heavy body across the floor, more than 200 pounds of cruelty and power, toward the third cauldron. This was for every scar left on broken backs, for every life crushed by fear and force. Nathaniel was the biggest, but Maria's anger made her strong. She tied him, lifted him, and said quietly, "You will end the same way my family ended. I want you to understand something before the end. You are not a master. You are not above anyone. You are just flesh, and tonight you face what you caused." She lowered him down. The heat filled the room. The cauldron reacted to his weight, oil rising, spilling over the edge. Time moved slowly. The room filled with sound and smell and pressure. Maria did not look away. She stayed still until it was over. 8 minutes passed, the same time Hope had suffered. When it ended, Maria stepped back and turned toward Master Edmund. Only one remained. Master Edmund sat stiff in his chair, unable to move, unable to escape what he had seen. He had watched his 3 sons face the end, had smelled the air change, had been forced to stay present for every second. Now he knew it was his turn. Maria walked toward him slowly. In her hand was a small kitchen knife, clean and sharp. She knelt so they were face to face. "Edmund Thornwood," she said, using his first name for the first time. She had never done that before. Tonight there were no masters. Tonight they were equal. Tonight he was only a man facing judgment. "You are 62 years old. You owned enslaved people for 40 years. You burned marks into nearly 90 human beings. You broke 50 families apart by selling children away. You personally caused dozens of deaths through punishment and cruelty. You hurt women without care or number. You built your life on pain." She rested the knife lightly against his throat, not cutting, only reminding him that she held control. "On September 18th, 1847, you ordered my husband and my daughters killed. You did it because you could. Because we were treated like objects. Because our lives meant nothing to you." A tear rolled down Edmund's face. Maria watched it fall. "You go last because you must understand everything. Your sons are gone. Your name ends tonight. Your land, your power, your legacy, it all ends here." Maria stood up. "I need you to know something. I do not feel sorry. I do not feel confused. I feel clear. I feel justice. I feel the power you stole from me." She put the knife down and pulled him from the chair. He was heavy, older, but still strong, yet Maria dragged him across the brick floor. His body scraped the ground. Blood ran from his face. He was awake for all of it and could do nothing. She pulled him to the final cauldron. The oil moved and waited. She tied his hands and feet. Then she paused. From her pocket she took a small wrapped bundle. Inside were 3 things she had saved: Isaiah's iron wedding ring, a ribbon from Grace's hair, a small wooden doll Hope never let go of, the only pieces of her family that remained. "They are watching you," she said. "Every spirit you destroyed is watching." She placed the items near the cauldron like an altar. She whispered a prayer in Yoruba, calling her ancestors to witness justice. Then she turned back to Edmund. "It took you 8 minutes to end my husband. 7 for Grace. 8 for Hope. You will take longer because you must understand." She raised him using the pulley and held him above the cauldron. "Any last words, Master Edmund?" "No, you cannot speak. Just like my family could not speak." She lowered him slowly. His body reacted. Fear showed in his eyes. His breath became short and sharp. Maria moved inch by inch, stopping, waiting, making him feel every moment. She paused with him suspended. "My daughters were held like this," she said. "They called for me, and I could not help them." She continued, lowering him. The heat filled the room. The smell grew heavy. 4 cauldrons now carried the weight of judgment. His eyes begged. Maria felt no mercy, only calm. Finally she lowered him completely. The oil moved violently, then slowly settled. Maria counted the minutes. 3. His body reacted without control. 4, 5, then less movement. 6, 7, stillness. She waited longer to be sure. When it was finished, she released the pulley. It was nearly midnight. Maria stood alone in the kitchen. 4 cauldrons. 4 men who had ruled through fear. The fires still burned softly. The smell filled the air. She expected to feel horror, guilt, or fear. She felt none of those things. She felt finished, balanced, complete. She knelt by the small altar and spoke quietly in Yoruba. "It is done. You are avenged. You can rest now. I loved you. I fought for you. Their suffering was for you." She stayed there for a long time. Then grief finally came. Deep grief for a life taken from her. 12 years of marriage gone. 2 daughters gone. A future stolen. She cried softly, letting the pain finally leave her body. When she stood, she looked once more at the cauldrons. "Merry Christmas," she said. Then she walked out into the cold Mississippi night. It was midnight. Christmas Day, 1847. She walked past the big house, silent and dark, past the quarters, quiet except for a few small fires. She reached the graveyard and lay down between the 3 graves. Isaiah on her left, Grace and Hope on her right. "I am tired," she whispered. "Tired of fighting. Tired of surviving." She closed her eyes. For the first time in months she slept without fear. Morning came bright and warm. Mistress Abigail Thornywood woke early and went downstairs. The house was empty. She called out. No answer. Confused, she walked toward the kitchen. When she opened the door, the smell stopped her breath. The room was still warm. Her eyes adjusted. 4 cauldrons, 4 bodies. She screamed. The sound spread across the land. People ran. Overseers, workers, servants. What they saw could not be understood. 4 powerful men gone. An empire ended in one night. Everyone back. "Go back to your quarters. This is a crime scene." But the enslaved people didn't move. They just stood there frozen. Some looked shocked. Some were terrified of punishment. And some, though they tried to hide it, felt something else. Satisfaction. Head overseer, a man named William Cooper, who had been spared only because he hadn't joined the Christmas Eve tradition, took control. "Someone bring the sheriff now and find Maria." "Where is Maria?" The enslaved people exchanged nervous glances. No one knew. Cooper grabbed a field hand named Samuel, not the same Samuel who had betrayed Isaiah, and ordered, "You check her cabin. Find her right away." Samuel ran to the slave quarters and checked Maria's cabin. Empty. He ran on, almost without thinking, toward the graveyard. Something inside him told him to look there. And there she was. Maria lying peacefully between 3 graves, arms spread wide as if she was hugging the earth. Her eyes were closed. She looked like she was just sleeping. Samuel approached carefully. "Maria." Nothing. He knelt, touched her shoulder gently. Maria. Still nothing. He checked for breathing, for a pulse. Nothing. Maria was gone. Samuel ran back as fast as he could. "She's gone. Maria's dead in the graveyard." Confusion erupted. Dead? How? When? Dr. Whitmore, the plantation's doctor, was summoned from his Christmas breakfast in town. An hour later he arrived and examined Maria where she lay. "No marks of violence," he said. No wounds, no trauma. She just stopped living. Heart failure, maybe, or she poisoned herself. Check her cabin for poison, Cooper commanded. They found a hidden leather pouch under the floorboards. It still contained traces of the oleandanda digitalis hemlock mixture. She had poisoned them, Dr. Whitmore concluded, and then poisoned herself. Murder-suicide. But that didn't explain how one enslaved woman had managed to put 4 grown men into boiling cauldrons. That required strength, tools, time, unless they'd been incapacitated first. Dr. Whitmore looked at the gingerbread still on the kitchen counter, noticed tiny scratches on the corners of the pan. He understood. She fed them poison first, he said slowly. It paralyzed them, kept them conscious, and then she boiled them alive while they couldn't fight. The room went silent as the horror sank in. One enslaved woman had killed 4 white men in the most brutal way imaginable. She had planned it for months, executed it flawlessly, and then died peacefully after achieving her revenge. Sheriff Thomas Barrett arrived from Yazoo City at noon. A large man with a thick beard and cold gray eyes, he examined the crime scene carefully. "This is the worst thing I've seen in 30 years, he said. "But also remarkable. The planning, the precision, the calculation." He looked at the gathered crowd. Who was Maria? What happened to her? The enslaved people stayed silent, but the overseers told the story. Isaiah's alleged theft, the public execution in September, grace and hope thrown into the oil. Barrett listened, his face darkening. So Edmund Thornwood boiled this woman's husband and children alive, then expected her to cook his meals and be obedient, and he was shocked when she took revenge. They were his property, Cooper protested. He had every right to boil children alive. Barrett interrupted sharply. "I don't care what the law says. That's pure evil." He stared at the 4 corpses in the cauldrons. Edmund Thornwood caused this. He murdered that woman's family in the most horrific way possible. She just returned the favor. "So what happens now?" Cooper asked. "Nothing," Barrett said. "She's dead. The perpetrator is dead. No one to arrest, no one to hang. Case closed." "But the other slaves, surely some helped her. Should we interrogate them? Make examples?" Barrett shook his head. "Start whipping people for this, and you'll have a full uprising. Every enslaved person saw what happened in September. They saw children murdered, and now they've seen the murderers get exactly what they deserved." He lowered his voice. "Leave it alone. Bury all 5 bodies. Tell people it was a tragic accident. Pray it doesn't inspire others." But it was too late. News of the Thornwood massacre spread through the Mississippi Delta like wildfire. Within a week, every plantation in Yazoo County knew. Within a month, it reached New Orleans, Memphis, Charleston, Richmond. Within 3 months, the entire South was whispering about the Christmas cook. Different versions circulated, some accurate, some exaggerated, but the core was the same. An enslaved woman had murdered her master and his 3 sons on Christmas Eve to avenge her family, using the same method they had used on her loved ones. The story terrified slave owners. If it could happen at Thornwood, one of the most secure plantations in Mississippi, it could happen anywhere. Plantation owners began taking precautions. They stopped letting enslaved people cook alone on holidays. They made them taste food before serving. They locked bedroom doors. Slept with loaded pistols. Some treated enslaved people slightly better, driven by fear, not kindness. Insurance companies raised premiums. Enslaved people were no longer seen as passive property. They were seen as threats. In January 1848, 3 similar incidents occurred in the Deep South. In Louisiana, a house slave named Thomas poisoned his master's family during a New Year's celebration. 8 people died. Thomas was caught and hanged, but told Maria's story at his trial. In Alabama, an enslaved woman named Ruth set fire to the big house while the family slept, killing 5. She escaped. Letters she left behind referenced the Christmas cook's courage. In Georgia, a blacksmith named Jacob killed 2 overseers with a hammer. Investigators found a hidden journal detailing months of planning. First entry: "If Maria could do it, so can I." The pattern was clear. Maria's revenge had sparked a change across the South, a shift in the way enslaved people saw resistance. For decades, the system assumed enslaved people would obey, scared and powerless. Maria proved them wrong. Careful planning could overcome strength. Patience and intelligence were weapons. Even the powerless could destroy the powerful, if willing to pay the ultimate price. Slave patrols doubled. Curfews tightened. Punishments became harsher. Fear increased. But the seed had been planted. By spring 1848, Maria's story had reached the Underground Railroad. Conductors told it to inspire newly escaped people. Afraid of being caught, they'd say Maria stayed and made them pay. You can at least run. The story reached Frederick Douglass in Rochester, New York. Douglass, an escaped slave and prominent abolitionist, sent investigators to Mississippi. They interviewed witnesses, checked sheriff reports, reviewed death certificates. In May 1852, Douglass published an article in the North Star titled "The Christmas Reckoning: Justice Delivered by an Enslaved Mother." He wrote, "We do not condone murder. We cannot celebrate violence. But Maria of Mississippi did what the law would not deliver: justice for murder of innocents. When a mother watches her children boiled alive and the law calls it discipline, when a wife sees her husband tortured and the law calls it property management, what recourse remains?" Maria's actions were terrible, but no worse than what was done to her family, no worse than what happens daily to 3 million enslaved people. Her revenge made the injustice visible, undeniable. The Thornwood family died as they had killed. That is not justice, that is symmetry. In a nation where law denies justice to black people, symmetry is the closest we get. Let Maria's story be a warning: you are not untouchable. Every life you destroy carries a cost. Perhaps not today, but inevitably the bill comes due. When it does, do not be surprised if payment is demanded in blood. The article spread in abolitionist newspapers across the North. It was read at anti-slavery meetings, discussed in churches, parlors, and town halls. The South reacted with fury. Mississippi banned the North Star. Owning abolitionist literature was punishable by prison for whites and death for enslaved people. But the story lived on. It spread orally among enslaved people, whispered from plantation to plantation, mother to daughter, father to son. It became a spiritual. The lyrics, coded like many spirituals, carried double meanings only enslaved people understood. On Christmas Eve the Lord came down, 4 angels fell without a sound. The cook prepared the holy feast and demons burned from most to least. White listeners heard a religious song. Enslaved people heard Maria's story. Meanwhile, back at Thornwood Plantation the aftermath continued. Mistress Abigail Thornwood suffered a total breakdown after finding her husband and son's bodies. She was sent to an asylum in Jackson, Mississippi, where she passed away 3 months later. The official cause of death was listed as melancholia, but staff reported that in her final days she spent hours screaming about burning men and boiling oil. The plantation itself was sold at auction in March of 1848. Nobody wanted to live there. Nobody wanted to sleep in the big house where 4 men had been murdered. The property sold for far less than its true value. The new owner, a cotton broker from Memphis named Harrison Kemp, tried to keep the plantation running, but the enslaved people refused to work in the kitchen building. They refused to even go near it. Kemp tore the old kitchen down and built a new one, but it made no difference. The enslaved people at Thornwood had experienced something they'd never known before, the knowledge that revenge was possible. Work slowed. Accidents became frequent. Tools vanished. Fires started mysteriously. Nothing catastrophic, nothing that could be pinned on anyone, but constant subtle resistance. Within 2 years, Kemp sold the plantation at a loss. Over the next 10 years it changed hands 3 more times, and each new owner faced the same troubles. By 1860, Thornwood Plantation was mostly abandoned. The big house sat empty, the fields grew wild again. The slave quarters were silent. During the Civil War, Confederate soldiers briefly used it as a field hospital. They reported strange events, screaming coming from the demolished kitchen area, the smell of burning flesh when no fire was lit, and the shadows of children playing in the graveyard. After the war, freed people in Yazoo County avoided the property entirely. They said it was haunted, cursed, that the spirits of everyone who died there, both the murdered family and their killers, could not rest. The land was eventually divided and sold for farming in the 1880s. Today, the exact location of Thornwood Plantation is uncertain. The big house foundation was plowed under long ago. The slave quarters have rotted away, but the graveyard remains. Local historians have identified a small clearing in what is now a soybean field, marked by a few weathered stones. Most graves are unmarked, as was common for enslaved people, but 3 graves sit close together, arranged as if the occupants are holding hands. No names, no dates, only 3 stones. Oral tradition in the black community of Yazoo County claims these are the graves of Isaiah, Grace, and Hope, and that Maria may also be buried there. Though no 4th stone exists, every Christmas Eve people leave offerings, flowers, food, and candles to honor a family destroyed by slavery, a mother who took terrible revenge, a woman who refused to accept what had been done to her. The story of Maria V. in Mississippi raises difficult questions that still resonate 177 years later. Was what she did murder or justice? Legally it was murder, premeditated, brutal, and methodical. 4 men killed in cold blood. Morally, however, the issue is more complicated. Edmund Thornwood and his sons murdered Isaiah, Grace, and Hope. They did it openly, legally, without fear of punishment. The law was on their side. Society supported them. The entire system of slavery enabled them. When the law provides no justice, when murder is legal as long as the victims are black, where does justice come from? Maria answered that question with boiling oil. Some historians argue she was mentally shattered by trauma, that watching your family die in front of you would drive anyone insane. Others argue she was completely sane, that her months of careful planning show rational thought, not madness, and that she consciously chose revenge over her own survival. Both points may be correct. The abolitionist community in 1848 was divided over Maria's story. Radical abolitionists like John Brown saw her as a hero, a soldier in a righteous fight against a terrible institution. They argued that enslaved people not only had the right, but the duty, to resist slavery by any means, including violence. Moderate abolitionists were uncomfortable with praising murder, but understood why it happened. They used Maria's story to show that slavery itself caused such tragedies that ending slavery would prevent future incidents. Some anti-slavery activists wanted to bury the story, fearing it would make their cause look cruel and turn moderates against them. But Frederick Douglass understood something important. Maria's story was powerful because it was shocking. It forced people to confront slavery in real, visceral terms. It's easy to discuss slavery as an economic system, a political issue, an abstract moral wrong. It's much harder to face the image of a mother watching her children die and planning revenge for months. That image sticks. It cannot be ignored. And that was the point. In American history, Maria represents more than one woman's revenge. She stands for the untold thousands of enslaved people who resisted slavery violently. Acts often erased from history because they contradicted the idea that enslaved people accepted their fate. History books long painted slavery as harsh but somehow loyal, a system where enslaved people were supposedly content. Stories like Maria's destroy that myth. They show enslaved people were not passive. They were human, resisting when pushed beyond endurance, using any means available, including violence. Historical records capture glimpses of similar events. In 1831, Nat Turner led a rebellion in Virginia that killed around 60 white people over 2 days, motivated by visions and witnessing brutal punishments. In 1841, Madison Washington led a revolt on the slave ship Creole, killing 1 enslaver and taking the ship to the Bahamas, freeing all aboard. In 1856, Margaret Garner killed her daughter rather than see her return to slavery, inspiring Toni Morrison's Beloved. These are the famous examples, the ones too large to ignore. But for every Nat Turner, dozens of enslaved people poisoned masters, set barns on fire, or caused deadly accidents. For every Margaret Garner, hundreds of mothers resisted quietly, teaching their children to read, preserving traditions, surviving with dignity. Maria is remarkable not because she was the only one who sought revenge, but because she actually carried it out. What happened to Thornwood's enslaved people after Maria died? Records are incomplete, but fragments exist. About 200 enslaved people lived there in 1847. After the massacre, they were sold, families split, individuals sent across the deep South. Some went to sugarcane plantations in Louisiana, others to cotton fields in Alabama. A few ended up in domestic work in New Orleans or Mobile. Wherever they went, they carried Maria's story with them. 20 years later, when the Civil War ended slavery in 1865, many witnesses were still alive. They told their children and grandchildren about the woman who avenged her family, about Christmas Eve when 4 white men died, screaming about proof that resistance was possible. In the 1930s, the Works Progress Administration interviewed formerly enslaved people as part of the Federal Writers Project. One interview in 1936 in Jackson, Mississippi, included a telling detail. A woman named Sarah Johnson, 94 years old, had been enslaved on a plantation near Thornwood. Asked about Christmas traditions, she paused and said, "We didn't celebrate Christmas Eve much at our place. Master was scared of it after Thornwood. I was just a girl, maybe 7, but I remember everyone talking about the cook who killed her master and his sons using the cooking pots. My mama said it was justice from God. Master said it was evil. But I'll tell you this, Master started treating us a bit better. Not much, but enough to notice. Fear teaches." The interviewer noted that she refused to give more details and became emotional. That fragment is one of the few direct testimonies that survived, but Maria's influence extended far beyond those who knew her. Her story shook the foundations of slavery. The system relied on the belief that enslaved people were inferior, simple, suited to servitude and content. That belief made it bearable to enslavers. Maria shattered it. She proved that enslaved people could plan long-term, act decisively, and resist. Her revenge was planned for 3 long months. She measured doses carefully, experimented with poisons, studied every routine, and prepared her alibis. This was not the work of a mind lacking intelligence. This was brilliant strategy. Second, her appearance of obedience meant nothing at all. Maria had been the perfect servant for 12 years, obedient, skilled, trusted with keys to every door. All that time she was fully human, fully capable of independent thought, fully aware of the injustice she endured. She was only waiting for the exact right moment. Third, no amount of power could guarantee safety. Edmund Thornwood was one of the richest men in Mississippi. He had 3 strong sons, armed overseers, 200 enslaved people under his control, and an entire legal and social system supporting his authority. Yet he died screaming as boiling oil consumed him. If that could happen to Edmund Thornwood, it could happen to anyone. This realization sent shockwaves through the slaveholding class. Plantation mistresses began refusing to eat meals prepared by enslaved cooks unless someone tasted them first. Masters started locking their bedroom doors at night. Some families moved entirely into cities, hiring overseers to manage plantations from a distance. Fear and paranoia became widespread, and paranoia corrodes power. A system built on fear can only function if those in power feel secure. Once that sense of security disappears, the system weakens. Maria's revenge. One woman's horrific act of violence was a small crack in the foundation of American slavery. Not enough to destroy it, but enough to weaken it. Enough to show that the system was not as unbreakable as it seemed. 13 years after Maria's death, the Civil War would erupt, slavery would crumble. 4 million enslaved people would gain freedom. Maria did not cause that, but she shaped the atmosphere, feeding the growing belief among enslaved people that resistance was possible, that white supremacy was not unshakable, that dignity could be reclaimed through action. She was one of thousands who resisted, but her act was meticulously documented in its horror, impossible to ignore, impossible to downplay, impossible to forget. The moral complexity of Maria's story has made it a subject of debate among historians and teachers. Some argue that celebrating her actions, or even discussing them neutrally, glorifies murder and might encourage violence. Others argue that ignoring stories like hers keeps the sanitized, misleading version of slavery alive, a version that erases the agency and resistance of enslaved people. This challenge reflects a larger difficulty in teaching American history. How can we honestly confront the violence of slavery without either diminishing it or sensationalizing it? Maria's story is violence meeting violence, horror answered with horror. There is no clear moral lesson, no simple takeaway. But perhaps that is why it must be told, because the truth of American slavery is not neat, it is not comfortable, it is not a story of clear heroes and villains with tidy resolutions. It is a story of multi-generational trauma, of systematic dehumanization, of people pushed beyond the limits of endurance, and sometimes, not often, but sometimes it is a story of people who pushed back. Maria pushed back. Was she right? Was she wrong? Was she justified? Was she a monster? History does not answer these questions, it simply records what happened. A mother watched her family die. 3 months later, the people who killed them suffered the same fate. The woman who killed them died peacefully beside her family's graves. Interpret it as you will. Today, 177 years after Christmas Eve 1847, Maria's story is being rediscovered. For decades, it existed mainly as an oral tradition in black communities in Mississippi, stories passed from great-grandparents to great-grandchildren. But in recent years, historians studying enslaved people's resistance have begun formally documenting these accounts. In 2003, historian Stephanie M. H. Camp published Closer to Freedom: Enslaved Women and Everyday Resistance in the Plantation South, briefly referencing the Thornwood incident. In 2016, the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., opened an exhibit on slave resistance that mentioned Maria's story alongside Nat Turner's Rebellion and the Underground Railroad. In 2019, archaeologists from the University of Mississippi surveyed the former Thornwood plantation site. They found the foundation of the demolished kitchen building. Excavation revealed something chilling: 4 circular burn marks in the brick floor, each about 4 feet across, spaced evenly where cauldrons had sat. The discovery renewed interest. News outlets covered it. Documentary filmmakers inquired. Descendants of Thornwood's enslaved community held a memorial service at the site on Christmas Eve 2019, exactly 172 years after the massacre. Around 200 people gathered in the soybean field where the plantation once stood. They lit candles, sang spirituals, and shared Maria's story with a new generation. One speaker, a great-great-great-great-granddaughter of an enslaved woman who witnessed the September 18 execution of Isaiah, Grace, and Hope, said, "We are here to remember not just what happened on Christmas Eve, but everything that came before it. We remember Isaiah, a blacksmith who dreamed of freedom. We remember Grace, who loved helping her mother cook. We remember Hope, only 8 years old. We remember their lives, not just their deaths. And we remember Maria not as a murderer or hero, but as a mother who loved her family so deeply she was willing to become a monster to avenge them. We don't celebrate her act, but we understand why she did it. We honor that she refused to accept what was done. She refused to move on. She refused to forgive. She demanded justice for what was taken, and she claimed it herself. That is not a guide for living, but a testimony to the strength of black people who survived the unbearable, endured the unendurable, and, when pushed to the absolute limit, fought back. Maria's story will never have a comfortable ending because it is not a comfortable story. It is about the darkest capabilities of humans, the cruelty of enslaving others and the violence such evil provokes. It is about a mother's love turned into a weapon, grief transformed into rage, justice delayed but delivered in blood. It forces us to face questions we would rather ignore. What would you do if your family was murdered and the law protected the killers? How much suffering can a human endure before breaking? Is revenge ever justified? Where does justice come from when law offers none? These questions have no easy answers. Maria did not seek easy answers. She looked at her husband and daughters in their graves and decided their deaths demanded repayment. On Christmas Eve 1847, she collected that debt in full. 4 men died screaming that night. 1 woman died peacefully the next morning. A family's murder had been avenged. A cycle of violence came full circle. More than 175 years later, we are still trying to grasp its meaning. Perhaps we are not meant to fully understand it. Perhaps we are only meant to remember. Slavery was not history, it was a living nightmare for millions. Remember that those people were not passive but fully human, with intelligence and the ability to resist. Remember that oppression always produces resistors, and sometimes they strike back with everything they have. Remember Isaiah, who died screaming in oil. Remember Grace and Hope, 2 little girls murdered for having the wrong father. Remember Edmund Nathaniel and Caleb Thornwood, who built an empire of suffering and died in its tools. And remember Maria Cook, mother, widow, killer, who refused to let her family's deaths go unanswered, who spent 3 months planning perfect revenge, who looked into the eyes of her family's murderers as they died the same way they killed, who walked calmly to her family's graves and lay between them, finally at peace, who became a whispered legend across the South, proving that even the most powerless can make the powerful pay. Her story is not happy, it is not inspiring in the usual sense, but it is true. And truth, however dark, must be remembered. Forgetting history risks repeating it. Erasing the stories of the oppressed prolongs oppression. Remember Maria of Mississippi. Remember Christmas of 1847. Remember that freedom has always been fought for, never given. Remember that justice delayed is justice denied, and when denied long enough, people create their own justice. Remember that every oppressive system carries the seeds of its own destruction. And remember that 4 men died in boiling oil because they believed human beings could be owned. That is the legacy of American slavery. That is Maria's story, and that story will echo as long as injustice exists.